Sit back down. You are not going anywhere. Derek Sinclair does not say it. He announces it, the way a judge announces a sentence he has already decided before the trial began. And for one long breath, nobody in the cabin moves. They do the thing people do when they witness something wrong in a sealed metal tube at 37,000 feet. They check their phones. They study the seatback screen. They look at anything except the young woman in row 24A, whose gray Caldwell Aerospace hoodie is soaked black with scalding coffee, whose hands are raised in front of her chest in the useless, instinctive gesture of someone trying to stop something that has already happened. Her palms are turning red in real time. Derek is already reaching for his laptop. That is his only concern. Renee Callahan, senior flight attendant, 22 years with Aurora Skyways, is moving toward the row, and she clocks the platinum luggage tag on Derek's briefcase a full second before she clocks the burns forming on the girl's hands. She reaches into her apron. She produces one foil-wrapped wet wipe and sets it on the armrest with the careful, deliberate motion of a woman who has already decided what category of problem this is. Then she turns to find napkins for Derek's laptop. That is what is happening in row 24 of Aurora Skyways Flight 619, 5.5 hours out of Seattle, somewhere over the wide gray middle of the country, less than 3 hours from touchdown at Boston Logan. What Derek Sinclair does not know, what Renee Callahan does not know, what nobody on this aircraft knows, is that the girl in the burned hoodie has already typed 11 words into her phone and hit send. 11 words that are, at this exact moment, landing on a screen at a gate in Boston. And by the time this plane lands, those 11 words are going to cost Derek Sinclair everything he has ever built. Because the man waiting at gate C-19 is not just anyone. He owns the airline. He owns the gate. He owns the plane Derek Sinclair is currently sitting in with a scalded 20-year-old beside him. And in a little under 3 hours, he is going to walk down that jet bridge and take apart the only thing Derek has ever been proud of, piece by piece, in front of everyone. Flight 619 smelled like recycled air and quiet impatience before it even pushed back. Jet fuel, synthetic upholstery, the ghost of somebody's fast food working its way through the vents. 286 passengers doing the ancient choreography of economy boarding, hoisting bags, negotiating armrests, performing the grim ritual of people who have done this before and know exactly how much dignity it costs. Naomi Carter found seat 24A 40 minutes before boarding began. She is 20 years old. She has dark brown skin and natural hair pulled back with a plain black scrunchie, and she is wearing a faded gray hoodie with Caldwell Aerospace across the chest. The lettering cracked from too many washes, dark jeans, clean white sneakers that have never once been the point of an outfit. No logos, no brand carry-on. What she has is a scuffed canvas backpack with a broken zipper held shut by a bright orange carabiner clip, and inside it, a dog-eared copy of Orbital Mechanics for Engineers, annotated in her own handwriting, a spare hoodie rolled into a tight cylinder, and a spiral notebook 3/4 full of equations that would make a propulsion professor sit up straight, and that would look, to almost anyone else, like nonsense. She has flown economy her entire life, not because she had to. Her father offered the upgrade every single time, the lie-flat suite, the warm towel, the private lane through security. Every single time, she said no. She said no because of something Marcus Carter told her when she was 12 years old. Standing in the departure hall at Seattle-Tacoma for the first time, watching the first-class line glide through a roped-off lane, while the economy line coiled back and forth behind switchback barriers for half a city block. She asked her father why the lines were different. He said, because some people paid for the shorter line. She asked if that was fair. He was quiet a moment. Then he said, I'll tell you what I know. You cannot lead people you've never sat among. Don't ever forget what this line feels like. She never did. She is sitting in it now, with a textbook on her lap, watching the cabin fill. Specifically watching the man who has just dropped himself into seat 24B, like the space was inadequate before he arrived, and has been improved by his presence. His name is Derek Sinclair, though Naomi doesn't know that yet. What she knows is mid-40s, white, a navy suit cut a size too tight across the shoulders, a phone already pressed to his ear before he's finished sitting down, a platinum luggage tag, angled outward on his briefcase, catching the cabin light like a signal flare. He does not look at her. To him, she is furniture. Listen to me, Warren. His voice fills the row without any effort at all, the voice of a man who has never once had to lower it in public. Ironclad doesn't ask for extensions. We set the deadline. That contract closes by Thursday, or I will personally restructure your entire logistics division. Are we clear? Good. Because I always close. He ends the call without acknowledging the person 12 inches to his left. He signals a flight attendant before his briefcase has even settled. Renee Callahan arrives with the speed of someone who spotted the platinum tag from the galley. Late 40s, blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, a smile with two entirely different frequencies. The one she gives Derek is warm, wide, pitched a half step higher than her real voice. Mr. Sinclair, welcome back. Your usual bourbon? Make it a double, Derek says, not looking up from his screen. And tell the captain to step on it. Some of us have empires to run. Of course, sir. Renee's eyes drift to Naomi. The smile does not travel with them. What reaches Naomi is a thin, professional line that never touches the eyes. Ma'am, that backpack needs to go in the overhead. It's a regulation. There's no room, Naomi says, gesturing up. I checked when I boarded. It's full. Renee doesn't look up to verify it. She simply restates the rule, the way people use policy as a substitute for actually engaging with what's in front of them. Derek lets out a theatrical sigh, addressing the air rather than either of them. For God's sake, just handle it. He glances at Naomi for the first time, hoodie, sneakers, worn backpack, a sweep that takes under 2 seconds and arrives at a conclusion. Honey, he says, in the tone of a man explaining something obvious to someone slow, shove it under the seat and stop causing problems. Some of us are trying to work. Heat climbs the back of Naomi's neck. She knows this tone. She's heard it in lecture halls, in coffee shops, in airport lounges, the specific architecture of contempt that dresses itself up as observation. She knows exactly what she's expected to do with it. Absorb it, apologize for taking up inconvenient space. She puts the backpack under the seat in front of her instead. It crushes the corner of her textbook. She says nothing about it. As Renee walks away for the bourbon, Derek mutters, pitched too quiet to be officially addressed, too clear to be missed. Unbelievable. They let anyone on these flights now. Probably some kind of charity seat. Naomi puts her headphones on. No music plays. She is listening. 2 rows up in 23C, a man named Elijah Moss closes his paperback around one finger to hold his place and looks back at row 24. He is 64, a retired high school principal from Tacoma, black, silver-haired, wearing a cardigan that has gone soft with age. And he has the particular stillness of a man who has watched this exact scene play out 100 times over 4 decades in classrooms and hallways, and now apparently airplanes. His expression says, plainly, I see this. He reopens his book without saying a word. Not yet. In 23D, Mara Delgado, 26, a travel content creator with a following built on what she calls the little cruelties nobody films, sets her phone face up on her tray table, screen dark, and does not press record. Not yet either. If you have ever been somewhere, you couldn't leave and watched one person decide. Another person didn't count. A flight, a train, a waiting room. You already know the particular kind of stillness that settles over strangers who suspect they're about to witness something. That stillness is settling over row 23 right now. And it is about to get much, much worse before anyone in this cabin understands exactly who they're sitting next to. The plane pushed back from the gate. Derek's second call began before the safety demonstration finished, which is technically against the rules. Renee walked past his row twice, and both times found something else worth looking at. This call was about Aurora Skyways specifically. The $400 million freight contract that had put Derek on this exact flight, the deal his boss, Warren Ashcroft, CEO of Ironclad Logistics, had entrusted to his best closer. Derek said the name Aurora Skyways 4 times in 5 minutes. He said the number 400 million once, loud enough to carry 6 rows in either direction. And once, almost as an aside, he said the name Marcus Carter. Carter runs a tight operation, Derek told whoever was on the other end, with the ease of a man summarizing someone he'd researched but never actually understood. Old school, steady. But these legacy guys always want the revenue more than they want the fight. We'll have it closed by Thursday. Watch. In 24A, Naomi's eyes stayed on her textbook. She has heard her father's name said by a lot of people in a lot of tones. Admiration, envy, careful diplomatic neutrality. She has never once heard it said by someone who had no idea she was listening. She opened her notebook to a clean page and wrote 2 words in small, careful handwriting. Derek Sinclair. Then she went back to orbital mechanics. 3 hours in, the cabin dimmed into its overnight rhythm. Window shades down. Reading lights scattered through the dark like small private suns. Naomi was deep in a problem from her differential equations seminar, working out a trajectory, correction burn. The small controlled adjustments a spacecraft makes mid-flight to reach a target it's already technically heading toward. There was something clarifying about it. You could be moving at enormous speed in approximately the right direction and still need precise, deliberate corrections to actually land where you meant to. Derek's fourth call was quieter. His boardroom baritone dropped into something more careful, the tone of a man who has had 3 bourbons and is working hard to sound like he's had one. He was naming numbers now, and names, people inside Aurora Skyways he planned to use as leverage. My commission on this is going to be the biggest payout of my career. Warren knows what this means. And Carter's people, they want this deal done. We walk in Thursday with the full package, and we're the answer to their problem. A pause, a laugh. Trust me, I know how to read a room. Naomi wrote out a delta V equation. She did not look up. The drink cart came through, and the difference in how Renee treated different rows stopped being subtle around row 22. Warm and chatty with the couple in 22A and B, efficient and kind with the family in 25. Patient and a little louder with the elderly man in 26A. She reached row 23, water for Elijah, tea for Mara, and rolled straight past 24A toward 25 without stopping. Naomi raised her hand. "Excuse me, water and tea, please." Renee turned back. The pause that followed had a shape to it. It wasn't long. It wasn't even the kind of pause most people would notice. Naomi has been listening for pauses like that her whole life, and she heard this one clearly. "We're short on cups," Renee said. "I'll come back." She did not come back for the better part of an hour. When she finally did, she had water. No tea. We ran out. She was not out of tea. Naomi watched her pour a fresh cup for the man 2 rows back not 4 minutes later. Somewhere in that hour, Derek's laptop screen had gone to sleep, and he'd nudged Naomi's textbook back under the seat with his shoe when its corner slid into the footwell. Not helpfully. The way you clear something out of your path. "Control your stuff," said, not looking at her. She picked it up. She placed it on her lap and opened it to chapter 9 and kept reading. Derek glanced at the cover. His expression moved through stages. Dismissal. Then a flicker of irritation, like he'd hit something that didn't fit the shape of the story he'd already decided about her. Then something close to offense, as if the textbook itself were an argument. "What are you reading that for?" Naomi looked up. looked at him for exactly 1 second. Physics. She went back to the page. What actually bothered Derek? Naomi understood this without having to think about it very hard. Wasn't the book. It was that she felt no need to explain herself to him. No shrinking, no apology arriving on schedule. He had learned over a great many years to expect that particular reflex from a particular kind of person, and its absence sat in him like a stone in a shoe. It was going to bother him for the rest of this flight. Watch what he does about it. The seatbelt sign chimed off somewhere over Nebraska. A family with 2 small children boarded, late at a connecting stop. Apologizing before they'd even reached their row, the specific apology of people who know they're disrupting a system. Their overhead space was gone. Renee moved down the aisle, opening bins, consolidating bags, and when she reached row 23, she didn't check what was actually available. She looked straight at Naomi.
Is there room in your overhead?
Yes, Naomi said. Next to the blue bag, Renee reached in and wedged Naomi's canvas backpack sideways at an angle where it was likely to fall to make room for the family's hardshell case. Naomi watched this happen and said nothing. Derek watched too, from the middle seat, with an expression that wasn't quite a smile. The look of a man observing what he considers the natural order of things sorting itself out correctly. In 23C, Elijah Moss didn't look up from his book. But he spoke. There was room in that bin before she showed you. Not loud, not combative, just accurate. Renee turned to him with a smile so thin it was nearly a straight line. Thank you, sir. I'll make sure everything is secured. She closed the bin. She moved on. Elijah went back to his book, but something in his posture had shifted. Angled a few degrees toward the aisle now, the posture of a man who knows something is building and has decided to be ready for it. Here is where you need to pay attention, because everything after this happens fast. Watch the coffee cart. It's going to come back around in a few minutes. And when it does, one man in this cabin is about to make a decision that will end his entire life as he currently understands it. And he is going to make that decision on camera, in front of a lawyer, in front of a retired principal, and in front of the daughter of the man who owns the plane he's sitting on. It happened during the second beverage service, an hour and change from landing. Renee's cart stopped at 24B. Derek's coffee, black, poured to the rim, steam still lifting off it. He held the cup in his right hand, half turned toward Naomi as if to set it on his own tray. And then his eyes moved to her textbook, open again on her lap, the one that had irritated him for hours without her ever once giving him a reason. He unclipped the tray table in one fluid, unhurried motion. His eyes stayed on her face the entire time. He tilted the cup forward. It was not a spill. The angle of his wrist was deliberate. The direction was deliberate. He watched her the whole time it happened, and that is the detail every single person in the surrounding rows will remember for the rest of their lives. He watched her. The coffee, close to 180 degrees, hit Naomi across the chest and lap in a wave of heat, so sudden it bypassed her body's normal processing and registered first as shock, then, a half-second later, as pain. It soaked her hoodie. It seeped through her jeans at the thighs. Her hands came up in the instinctive, useless gesture of someone trying to stop something already finished, and they absorbed the worst of it directly. Palms, backs, the spaces between her fingers. The sound she made wasn't a scream. It was the sound a body makes when pain arrives faster than the mind can file it. Sharp, involuntary, real. The cabin went silent, not gradually, immediately. Mara's phone was already recording. The man in 24C was on his feet, his voice loud. He did that on purpose. I'm sitting right here. I saw it. Elijah Moss was standing before he'd consciously decided to stand. Derek pulled his laptop back off the tray. He checked his phone. His only immediate concern, in the first 3 seconds after scalding a 20-year-old stranger, was his own electronics. Then he looked around at the staring rows and assembled an expression fast, the face of a wronged man. She startled me. She grabbed at me. I didn't do anything on purpose. Louder now. Look at my laptop. Look at my pants. Naomi was pulling wet denim away from her thighs because the fabric was holding the heat against her skin. Her palms were already blistering, the tight, translucent rise of a burn, starting at the center of each one. She was breathing in short, controlled increments. Not because she was ashamed of the pain, but because she understood, with total clarity, that the moment tears showed up, the story of this moment became available for Derek to rewrite. "It burns," she said, quietly. Not for sympathy. The way you'd state a temperature reading. Derek looked at her the way you look at something that requires no response. "Well, don't just sit there," he said. "Clean it up. And while you're at it, that's Italian leather. Probably cost more than your tuition. You can start there." The intake of breath from the surrounding rows was audible as a single sound. Elijah, standing in the aisle, said, "That's enough." Derek didn't look at him. "Sit down. You don't know what happened." "I have it on video," Mara said from 23D, still filming. She didn't grab him. He turned that cup toward her, on purpose. "I have the whole thing." Renee arrived from the galley at a near run and took in the scene in under a second. Derek with his laptop and his righteous face. Naomi burned and wet and young in a cheap hoodie, and 16 years of trained instinct made its calculation before conscious thought could intervene. She went straight to Derek. "Sir, are you all right? Your laptop." She was already pulling napkins from her apron. "I need help," Naomi said, her voice steady. "I have burns on my hands and my legs. I need the burn kit." Tyler Brooks, the junior attendant, was already 12 rows back, moving fast with the medical kit in his hands. He'd found it in the second cabinet of Galley B, without needing to check, because he remembered exactly where it lived. He was moving as fast as protocol allowed, which was not fast enough. "Tyler," Renee's voice didn't rise. "Put that back. Go prep the landing service. She's burned. I can see the blistering from here. I'll handle it." A pause. One beat. "Go." Tyler stopped. He looked at Naomi. Naomi looked at him. Something passed between them. Acknowledgement, apology, the specific grief of a person who can see the right thing to do and isn't allowed to do it. She gave him a fractional nod. "It's okay, I know." "Go," he retreated. His face, turning away, looked like grief. Renee turned back to Naomi and produced, from her apron pocket, one single foil-wrapped wet wipe. She set it on the armrest with the deliberate precision of someone executing a decision she had already made. "You've created a significant disturbance, miss. I'll need you to clean yourself up. Mr. Sinclair is a Platinum Elite member, and he's indicated that you—" "He poured it on me," Naomi said, "on purpose. There are people in this cabin who saw it." "That's not what I'm hearing." "That's not what happened," Derek confirmed from 23D's direction, loudly. "I have the video," Mara said again, louder this time. "You can hear her from here." She did not grab him. He looked at her first. He made a decision. "I have all of it." Renee looked at Mara. Her expression didn't change. "Thank you. I'll note that in my report." She said it exactly the way people say things they have no intention of doing. Naomi picked up the wet wipe. She held it in her burned hand and looked at it. One disposable wet wipe, for burns, covering both hands and both thighs, and set it back on the armrest without a word. Renee had already turned back to Derek. "Sir, I'm so sorry for the disruption. We have an empty exit row. Let me get you somewhere more comfortable." Derek stood, straightened his jacket, picked up his briefcase. He looked at Naomi one final time, and his expression contained something that wasn't quite victory, but stood right next to it. "Get yourself sorted," he said, "and think about what just happened here. You brought this on yourself." He walked to the exit row. Elijah Moss did not move from the aisle. He looked down at Naomi, at her blistering hands, at her soaked hoodie cooling and clinging worse by the second, and asked, "Are you all right, child?" "Not yet," she said, "but I'm going to be." She stood, The burned skin at her thighs pulled against wet denim, a dragging, stained pain, more personal than the initial shock. She didn't hurry. She walked the aisle at the careful pace of someone choosing every step rather than reacting to it, past rows of passengers who went quiet as she passed, one woman in 21B reaching out just to touch her arm. No words, just the lightest human contact one stranger can offer another. Naomi nodded without stopping and kept walking into the lavatory, and the door closed behind her. Cold water first. Relief, immediate and completely insufficient. A lowering of the alarm, without touching what was underneath. She turned her palms up under the tap and watched the redness, the tight rise of blisters, starting, the specific evidence of what had just been done to her. She has studied the physics of heat transfer. She had never once applied the formula to her own skin. She was applying it now. She was 14 years old again. For just a second, standing in the lobby of the Meridian Grand in downtown Chicago. Her father had brought her to a board retreat, not as his daughter on display, as an observer, because he wanted her to see how decisions actually get made. They'd flown in on Aurora Skyways and taken a cab from the airport, both of them in ordinary clothes. Because Marcus Carter has always believed a person should be able to walk into any room as themselves, and have that be enough. The conference floor was the 28th. She was waiting by the guest elevator because her father was still on a call near the entrance, and she didn't want to hover at his elbow. A hotel manager approached. Not unkind. That was the part that stayed with her the longest. Not hostile, just smooth, professional, and completely certain. "Excuse me, miss. This elevator bank is for hotel guests. I am a guest. My father has the key. And where is your father?" She'd pointed across the lobby to a tall man in jeans on his phone, entirely unremarkable in the particular way that has nothing to do with suits or status. The manager looked at him, looked back at her, and "Who is your father?" Not unkind, perfectly professional, and absolutely certain that there was no answer to that question that would resolve the situation, because it wasn't really a question. It was a category. At 14, Naomi understood with a clarity that would sit in her bones for the rest of her life exactly which category she and her father had just been placed in. Marcus had ended his call, crossed the lobby, put a hand on her shoulder, and said very quietly, "I'm her father, and I own this hotel, along with 5 others in this chain." The manager went pale and apologized and stepped aside. Her father did not enjoy the apology. He rode the elevator up in silence, and when the doors opened on 28, he said, "That's why you have to know your own worth, before anyone else gets to decide it for you. Nobody gets to tell you where you belong. Not ever." The water ran cold over her palms in the lavatory of Flight 619. Somewhere out in the cabin, Renee was pouring Derek a fresh bourbon, and Naomi Carter stood in a 6-square-foot bathroom at 37,000 feet, in pain, and for the first time since Derek tilted that cup, completely clear. "Did you stay yourself?" That's the question her father would ask first, before anything practical, before the response and the remedy and the consequences. "Did you stay yourself?" She looked in the mirror. Yes. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't begged. She hadn't let Derek Sinclair's version of who she was replace her own. Now it was time to let her father do what he does. She opened her backpack carefully, unhooked the orange carabiner, and found the spare hoodie folded inside. Aurora Skyways branded. A gift from her father she'd never once worn because she didn't want to walk around advertising the connection. She'd wanted to earn rooms on her own before she announced who she was related to. She pulled it on. The logo sat on her chest, facing out. Nobody in the cabin would notice. It didn't matter. She noticed. She folded the coffee-soaked hoodie into a sickness bag she'd carried in with her, straightened her jeans as best she could, and looked in the mirror one more time before she opened the door and walked back to row 24. Derek was in the exit row now, holding court, telling his version to anyone within earshot. In his version, she'd grabbed at him. In his version, he was the one who'd been wronged. These entitled types, he told the man beside him, who hadn't asked, think a plane is a social justice platform. I'm trying to run a $400 million deal, and I have to deal with this. The man beside him said nothing. He was looking at his phone. Elijah Moss had returned to his seat, but he wasn't reading anymore. He sat upright, hands folded, eyes open, and when Derek's voice reached him at full volume, he spoke at a volume calibrated precisely to carry into the exit row. I was 3 feet away from you. I saw what you did. I watched you decide to do it. I'd strongly encourage you to stop saying things in this cabin that aren't true. Mind your business, old man. The welfare of a young woman in pain, Elijah said, is everyone's business on a plane, especially one with no exit. He turned forward again. He didn't need Derek to answer. Mara's clip had already started uploading, over the seatback Wi-Fi. 41 seconds, Derek's wrist angle, the deliberate tilt, Naomi's hands going up. Derek checking his laptop before he so much as looked at the person he'd just burned. Her caption, "What I just watched happen on my flight. Not staged. She's still on this plane. She has burns." Naomi sat back down in 24A. The cold compress and burn gel Tyler had left on her armrest were still there, waiting. She wrapped her right hand, and the relief was sharp enough to bring water to her eyes, which she blinked back. The man in 24C, Gordon Ashby, she'd learn, leaned toward her. "I'm a corporate attorney. I wrote a statement on my phone the second it happened. With your permission, I'd like to give it to whoever needs it when we land." "Yes," she said, "please." He nodded and went back to his newspaper, his hands very steady. They landed at Boston Logan on schedule, and the seatbelt sign chimed off, and 286 people began the second ancient ritual of air travel, the slow, shuffling exit down a narrow aisle, and that is exactly when the frozen moment happened. Because, as the forward door opened and the jet bridge connected, a man in a plain gray suit stepped onto the aircraft ahead of the ground crew, and Renee Callahan, who had spent this entire flight deciding who deserved her attention, looked up and went completely still. Not because she recognized his face, because she recognized the way the gate agent behind him was standing, at attention like a soldier, and because the captain had just stepped out of the cockpit and said, quietly, "Mr. Carter," and every single word Renee had said in the last 5 hours rearranged itself in her head in half a second. Marcus Carter is 53 years old. He is not wearing a suit that announces anything. He has the same unremarkable, ordinary presence his daughter inherited, the kind of presence that has nothing to do with volume. He walked to row 24, and he did not look at Derek Sinclair first. He looked at his daughter's bandaged hands. "I got your text," he said. 11 words, sent from a lavatory sink an hour and a half earlier. "I'm hurt on 6/18. He did it on purpose. Come." He turned to Derek Sinclair, who had, in the space of about 4 seconds, gone from mid-sentence about his $400 million deal to a man realizing the floor had opened beneath his chair. "Mr. Sinclair," Marcus said. His voice did not rise. It didn't need to. "I'm Marcus Carter. I own this airline. That's my daughter, and I have a signed deposition from Gordon Ashby, 41 seconds of video from Ms. Delgado, an incident report from Tyler Brooks, and a witness statement from Mr. Moss, all of which say the same thing you just told a stranger in the exit row. Except in their version, it's true." Derek opened his mouth. What came out was not an apology. "You don't understand. This was a misunderstanding. I was going to speak to someone about the service. I never intended." "You looked at her while you did it," Marcus said. "Everyone on this plane saw that part too." Warren Ashcroft's name came up before the jet bridge even finished emptying. Marcus had already called him from the gate, and the call lasted less than a minute, most of it silence on Warren's end. By the time Boston PD boarded to take a statement, Warren Ashcroft had already emailed Ironclad Logistics' entire executive team, informing them the Aurora Skyways contract and Derek Sinclair's employment were both terminated effective immediately. Derek was arrested on the jet bridge for assault. His first call from the holding cell to Warren lasted 40 seconds and consisted of 2 sentences from Warren's end before the line went dead. Naomi stood at the front of the cabin in her father's arms for a long moment before either of them said anything else, and when she finally stepped back, she looked out at the empty rows, the tilted tray tables, the faint smell of coffee still in the recycled air, the whole geometry of a space that had held 286 people, and one very specific, very ugly moment, he thought. I was nothing, she said, not bitterly, just a fact she was acknowledging before setting it down. He looked right at me for 5.5 hours and never once saw anything. And now, her father said, he's going to spend a long time understanding he was looking at the future the whole flight. Craig Sinclair's unraveling. That's what people would end up calling it, dropping the Derek entirely in the news coverage, which somehow felt more accurate than anyone intended, began before the plane's engines had even cooled. By morning, Mara's clip had crossed 400,000 views and been picked up by 2 aviation trade outlets and 1 national paper. The assault charge, backed by Gordon Ashby's deposition, Tyler Brooks's incident report, and footage from both Mara and a bystander streaming under a different account, held without a crack. Derek pleaded down to 2 years probation, a substantial fine, and 300 hours of community service, assigned by a judge with a quiet, exacting sense of poetry to the burn unit at Boston General. 40 Saturdays in a building that gave him no choice but to finally learn, firsthand, what burns actually cost the people who carry them. The civil suit that followed took the rest. Not the savings. Not the commission he'd been counting weeks in advance. Not the house in Wellesley. Not the car. Ironclad's leasing division repossessed from his driveway while he was still in a holding cell. His wife had already spoken to a lawyer of her own before the tow truck arrived. He was permanently banned from every Aurora Skyways partner carrier, a list that, within 18 months, had grown to 11 airlines. The man who had measured his entire worth in status tiers and platinum tags found himself, for the first time in his adult life, with nowhere left to fly and no standing left to get him there. Renee Callahan's suspension became a termination within 3 weeks, once Aurora Sky's internal investigation pulled her full service file. 14 formal complaints over 11 years. Every single one filed by an economy passenger. Every single one closed with the same internal notation. Not credible. No escalation warranted. With that record attached to her name, no major carrier would touch her application. She found work, eventually, grounded, in the specific, fitting sense, for a woman who had spent over a decade deciding from 37,000 feet who deserved care and who deserved a single wet wipe. Tyler Brooks's promotion took effect on his very next shift. Within a year, he was leading Aurora Skyways in-flight service and safety curriculum, built around a line Marcus Carter said publicly at its launch. No passenger's safety is conditional on their fare class. People started calling it the Brooks Standard. 4 partner airlines adopted it within 2 years. 6 years after Flight 619, Captain Naomi Carter brought her aircraft down onto the runway at Boston Logan with the specific, practiced smoothness of someone who has always known, from the inside, exactly what it costs to stay calm when the instruments say the conditions don't want you to. The scars on her palms, faint, silvery lines now, had stopped being marks of what was done to her a long time ago. She thought of them as proof of what she'd held onto that night. Her composure, her clarity, herself. She'd finished her degree at Caldwell. She'd joined Aurora Skyways at the very bottom. Bag handling, gate operations, ground logistics, because her father's lesson was still true and she still believed it. Flight school found her, or she found it. Either way, she turned out to be a natural. Her father's nerve, her own mathematical precision. The particular kind of calm that isn't the absence of feeling, but the management of it, which is the only kind that actually counts when something goes wrong at altitude. She rose the way she'd insisted on rising from the very beginning. Not as the owner's daughter, but as Carter, the pilot, who was always the most prepared person in the room, the one you wanted at the controls when things stopped going according to plan. Marcus had retired 18 months earlier, at a board meeting where the vote for his successor was unanimous. At gate C-19, when the jet bridge extended and the cockpit door opened, and Captain Naomi Carter stepped out in her uniform, 4 gold stripes on each shoulder, the specific and unmistakable authority of someone who has earned every single one of them. Her father was standing there waiting, holding a thermos of coffee and a folded newspaper. Just a man. Just her dad. "Rough landing," he said, eyes crinkling. "Oh, shut up, Dad." She pulled him into a hug that ran a beat longer than the joke required. He held on for one moment past the moment's natural end. Then he stepped back and looked at her, the uniform, the stripes, the face he'd known since it was 6 hours old. And his expression wasn't pride exactly, though pride was in it somewhere. It went deeper than that. It was the specific, irreplaceable relief of a parent watching their child become someone the whole world was genuinely better off for having. Derek Sinclair once stood over a 20-year-old girl in a middle seat on a cross-country flight and decided, in under 2 seconds, that she was nothing. Based entirely on what she was wearing, where she was sitting, and a story about people like her that he had told himself so many times it had calcified into fact. He was so certain of that story that he was willing to hurt someone just to protect it. He had spent 5.5 hours sitting next to a future airline captain. He simply never had the eyes to see her. Real power was never in the platinum tag. It was never in the volume of a man's voice or the length of the line he could make other people stand in. Real power is knowing who you are before anybody else gets a vote in it. It's staying yourself when someone tries to make you smaller in front of a full cabin. It's holding steady through the pain, through the dismissal, through a single wet wipe and a stranger's cold judgment and a lavatory mirror at 37,000 feet. Completely, entirely, undeniably yourself. It's landing the plane. If this story reached something in you, not because of how it ended, but because you recognized someone in it, maybe even yourself, take a second and like this video. It genuinely helps this story find the person who needs it next. Send it to someone who's ever been told, in any way, by anyone, that they didn't belong somewhere they had every right to be. And before you go, tell me one thing in the comments. If you'd been sitting in row 23 that day, watching this unfold, would you have spoken up, or would you have looked at your phone? I read every answer.